Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and now that Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019 has finally been released, I think it's time to revisit an older video of mine. Way back in February of 2015, I did a list called The 5 Things That Need to Happen in Godzilla 2. And this was back, mind you, when we know very little about what was going to happen. All we knew for certain at that point was that 1. Godzilla 2 was happening, 2. It was going to have Mothra, Ghidorah, and Rodan in it, and 3. It was going to be released in 2018. Obviously that last one wound up changing. But either way, I still made the list. It's been out there for a little while, and I thought, now that we have the second film, may as well see what on the list came to pass, and if certain things didn't come to pass, whether or not that actually matters. So the first thing I put on the list was cast a Japanese actor in the lead role. That may sound like it was some sort of representation thing. It really wasn't. I don't think it matters that much necessarily whether or not a main character is black or white or Asian or whatever. I just figured Godzilla is a very Japanese franchise, so why not have this be the opportunity to have a lead actor that is Asian in a Godzilla movie? That's made in America, I mean, what better opportunity, right? Just a little something I threw out there just for the heck of it. Did it happen? Not really, but it didn't not happen either. The human cast isn't really one that has leads and secondaries. It's an ensemble cast, and all of those humans are secondary to the monsters, who are the actual main characters. But as far as how things are divvied up in terms of representation, if you will, we still predominantly follow a Caucasian family. However, there are 2 very prominent Asian characters in the film, those being Ken Watanabe's character and Shi Zhang's character. Serizawa, as played by Watanabe, was in the first movie, but his role is greatly increased here, and Zhang's character is also very prominent. So they were sure to include a wide variety of people in this film, very similar to what Kong Skull Island did, but also did it in a way that wasn't really drawing attention to it. It's not one of those, ooh, look how diverse our cast is sort of things. No, it just had a wide variety of people and let that speak for itself. They didn't really need to draw attention to it. And as a result, you're just left with having a good cast. So it didn't quite happen that Serizawa or somebody else, Japanese or Asian, became a lead character, but we definitely had them be more prominent. So sort of happened here, but ultimately I don't think it's really that important, because the real stars are the monsters, and they technically aren't defined by race anyway. Fourth part was have a major set piece somewhere in Japan. Again, didn't actually happen, but I don't necessarily know if that matters. I just thought it would be interesting to have the monsters show up in Japan again at some point. But it didn't happen in this movie. Ultimately, though, like I said, I don't really think that's a major thing. And we still have Godzilla vs. Kong after all. It's possible we could have some sort of grand confrontation there. But the major set pieces happened in Antarctica and Mexico and Boston. There was a little bit in Washington, D.C., but those were the primary set piece areas. And we had destruction practically all over the world in terms of what was going on elsewhere. But, we still have time to have a set piece in Japan in Godzilla vs. Kong, or if there are any sequels that come after that, hopefully. But for now, it didn't happen in this movie. I don't really think it was that important for it to have happened. Number 3 was to mix old monsters and new monsters, and that definitely happened. I mean, don't get me wrong, the movie was more or less primarily focused on the big four: Godzilla, Rodan, Ghidorah, and Mothra. But we did have new monsters. They didn't necessarily play the largest roles, but they were definitely there. They were new. They were interesting, the ones we saw. We didn't necessarily see all 17 of them at once, mind you. But there are new monsters there, which means there is potential for these movies to expand with new creatures. Whether or not they'd be leading creatures or supporting creatures, we don't know. But that one definitely did happen, and that's actually part of why I like when kaiju movies happen, because unlike with, say, superhero movies, you see new creatures added to kaiju movies all the time. With superheroes, you basically take whatever is in the comic book and stick exclusively to that. You rarely see new characters added. Like, when Batman the Animated Series came along, they added characters like Harley Quinn, sure, but that's rare for that to happen. Harley Quinn, of course, skyrocketed in popularity and then got incorporated into the comics, and now she's a staple of that thing and has her own solo series and everything. But with kaiju, yeah, you bring back the old classics, obviously, but you can also bring in new monsters, and that's what makes it more interesting, because you can actually have new stuff every once in a while. So, I like that they're striking that balance of new monsters and old monsters. According to Legendary's official statements, that was always the plan anyway, but I'm glad that one actually did happen. Number 2 was expand the mythology. And again, they did exactly that. A lot of people were thinking, based on Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island, that they were clearly going to stay terrestrial with the MonsterVerse. All the monsters were somehow going to be naturally occurring creatures. Unusual naturally occurring creatures, but naturally occurring all the same. And I think they were basing that on how, like, we had that line in Kong Skull Island where they say, they reference SETI, and John Goodman's character Bill Randa says, yeah, but those guys are nuts. So people were thinking, well, I guess they just ruled out all the aliens. And people also thought, oh, there are cave paintings of King Ghidorah. That means he must be a naturally occurring creature here. Therefore, his alien origins aren't part of the MonsterVerse. Well, minor spoilers here. Ghidorah is confirmed to be an alien for this film. He definitely comes from outer space. They make that very clear. They don't actually show it happening, but it's referenced in all the legends. He comes from the stars. So they've just opened up a wide variety of possibilities. Now we have a potential to see alien kaiju show up. Or who knows what else. And there's also that element of, we're still not entirely sure whether the kaiju are natural creatures or if there's maybe something a bit more otherworldly going on with them as far as the terrestrial ones go. Because there's a whole big bunch of stuff revolving around these monsters that seems to hint at them being very, very different. Not even like referring to the viral marketing that says Rodan has magma in his blood. I'm just talking about what we see in the movie. How Mothra was indeed worshipped and how there might be another egg out there. Or how Godzilla's resting place, where he goes to recharge, is a literal underground city in the hollow earth. We don't know where that is, I don't think. We never actually got an established location. But I mean, there are many possibilities that are opening up now. The mythology has indeed been expanded, so check mark on that one. And of course, here's the big one. Devote more screen time to the kaiju. Big old check mark there. The movie definitely had more screen time for Godzilla and all the monsters than 2014 did. And again, I like the 2014 film. I'm not necessarily upset that it had limited screen time, but I did specify in this video I was only going to tolerate it that once. The other movies that would come needed to do more. And So far they have. Again, this was before Kong Skull Island became part of the MonsterVerse. It gave more screen time to the monsters too. But we're talking about Godzilla King of the Monsters here, and there was definitely more time devoted there. I have seen some reviews that say the movie still had this annoying habit of cutting away to the humans during the fights. I just want to quickly address that. I won't deny that this does happen at times. But again, part of what the MonsterVerse does is maintain a human perspective of the monsters. That's kind of a major theme throughout it. It's about reminding mankind that they are really puny when compared to these things. And also, let's be clear, the humans are always doing stuff. The original movies, they tend to cut away to the humans during the fight as well, and it's just a staple of the series. Sometimes in those older movies, the humans are doing stuff that actively serves the plot. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're just watching and doing color commentary on the fight. But it does still happen. So it's not a problem exclusive to King of the Monsters. If it's even a problem, it isn't necessarily a problem, but I can get more into that in another video. As far as how it was executed in King of the Monsters, I think it was fine. And again, you still had more screen time devoted to the monsters. And even when those monsters weren't on screen, the movie was still entirely about them. Everything the humans do somehow relates back to the monsters. It all circles back to Godzilla and Ghidorah and Mothra and Rodan. They are always the focus, whether they are on camera or not. So, in a way, the additional screen time is bolstered by the fact that even when the monsters aren't on screen, they're still in focus. So, again, huge check mark on that. I would say Godzilla King of the Monsters, well, it filled 3 of the 5 things I initially said. Some of those things didn't really matter, though. So, overall, that's how it measured up to my list. That list was made years ago before we knew anything that was going to happen. So, either way, I'm not basing my love or hate for Godzilla King of the Monsters on whether or not it lives up to this list. I did this just for the heck of it. Yes, there's stuff I wanted to see here, and if we could get set piece in Japan in Godzilla vs. Kong, or a movie that may come after Godzilla vs. Kong, we'll see. I would certainly like for that to happen, but ultimately, I still think the movie should be judged on its own merits, and judging it on its own merits, I still think it's really good. And I'll get into discussing spoilers, like the major spoilers, at another point. As for now, I just wanted to go back to this and see whether or not any of those things happened, and now that I've done that, I will just prepare to talk about spoilers in a completely different video. Well, there you have it, everyone. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer, signing off. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, as well as subscribe to the channel for more content of a similar nature. Also, check the description for links to our Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon pages, as well as the Amazon link for the novel Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, penned by yours truly. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.